Aside from Carmine Galante, who were the most feared men in the Bonanno crime family? Let's check it out. I'm James Gladwish and welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, I sat down again with former Bonanno Crime Family associate Frank Fiordolino to discuss some of the most feared men in the Bonanno Crime Family. And for those who aren't familiar with Frank, here's a bit about him. Frank Fiordolino had two uncles in the Bonanno Crime Family and various other relatives involved in organised crime. He would enter a life of crime himself and was associated with Vito Guzzo Jr. and the infamous Giannini crew. Following a murder and murder conspiracy charge, he became a government witness in the early 2000s. He can be seen on the excellent YouTube channel 52 Topics with co-host Brett, which is well worth checking out. The link to this is in the comments below. While you were growing up, before you were kind of in the life yourself, what were the kind of names of mobsters within the Bonanno family that people kind of discussed and were potentially, more fearsome than others?
Before I could even walk, there was people that, in my neighborhood that were always brought up. Bruno Indelicato was one of them. He ends up getting killed in '72 in a pool. And he was one that even 20 years, 30 years after he was in around no more, people were still talking about how ballsy of a person he was. So that was before my time. Cesare Bonventre was always spoke about being a scary guy. And a guy, this is a term people used to use. They say when he went on a job, he'd go by himself if he had to. In fact, he did, and he cost him his life. He didn't care like that. He was just a ballsy type of person. I'm trying to think. A lot of these people that were ballsy ended up dying. They lived by the sword. They died by the sword. It seemed like.
So I read an FBI document which talked about a guy who was close with Carmine Galante, and in fact he missed being killed in 1979 because he had a stomach illness. It was Angelo Presenzano. Apparently he was particularly vicious. I mean, he doesn't look it. It's quite unassuming looking. Do you know much about him at all?
I don't. I like over the years, I found out he died a month or 2 months after or something from a stomach illness, and he missed that assassination, and by a little bit, he probably would have been killed, being that he was close to Carmine. But that's about it.
And obviously, what about, again, they're probably more Brooklyn-based, but did people talk about the likes of Sonny Red before he was killed and things like that?
So they were from South Brooklyn, and my neighborhood, Bushwick, growing up, was North Brooklyn, and then eventually Ridgewood, which was Queens, because it's a border town. No, not much, but yeah, he was more of the capable of the three that died, if you will. I don't think he came from a mob family to be exact, but gradually, obviously his son, a very able guy.
Yeah, Bruno.
Hearing about it, but he was definitely the ones they were worried about in that recaptain hit. That Sonny Red was.
And obviously, what about the reputation? Obviously, again, I know not directly in your neck of the woods, but obviously Tommy Pitera, was he discussed a lot amongst people?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, not during, because you got to remember, by the time he goes to jail, I'm 18, 19 years old. So his legend, people don't speak about guys that might have murders. It's just, especially in the 80s, and as I remember, they were just, these guys were nuts, and they had a little crew and whatever, but a little big crew actually. But I learned more about him after he was in jail. He used to hang out with this guy named Kojak, a bald guy.
Yeah.
And they would sometimes go to Kojak would go gamble in the Knickerbocker Avenue now and then. So it was more like an after thing with them guys.
And it's an interesting individual, a guy called Russell Morrow, who was allegedly on the Galante hit, and then he was killed in, I think it was 91. Were you familiar with him at all?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen him maybe twice, 3 times back in the day. He ended up getting killed in that Taglione hit.
Yeah.
There was Sal Vitale there. The guy. Who else was there? I think Boxcar Castelletto, who I met, and yeah, he was a guy that was around, but I think they give him too much credit when it comes to. No, he was a tough fucking guy, and that was his aura. But he also was. They gave him like that he was part of like the Sicilian crew too much, and I don't remember him being part of that crew like that. And what I mean by like that, coming around, talking the language and stuff, these guys were very Sicilian based, and I just don't remember him in that aspect.
So let's
could have been there, but I don't remember it that way.
That's okay. So let's move on to more kind of your era, the 1990s. There's a few names here which were obviously from all over the five boroughs, but you might obviously be familiar with. Obviously from like the Bronx, we're looking at Johnny Joe Spirito Sr. Were you familiar with the name?
Of course, I met Johnny Joe in jail. Good guy, real nice guy. Kind of remorseful about the Giorgio thing. I remember that. I didn't talk about it, but I think on his sentencing he made a comment like make George rest his soul, because maybe he felt that Joe just talking about Joe Basciano, and a lot of people felt that way, especially after Sal talked and everything. Were misled.
Well, that's going to be a question actually, because obviously George from Canada was actually a capable guy himself. He was on the three captains here, and I believe, according to some reports, he's the one who actually finished off Sonny Red. And then obviously nearly 2 decades later, he gets into a car with Patti DeFilippo, with Johnny Joe driving, and on Basciano's orders is killed. Yeah, so it'd be interesting. What was the reaction on the street at the time when George from Canada was killed?
None. None. You got to remember, and I keep telling people this, and they're like, you talk about like resurfacing of Sicilians in the 2000s and 10, and the Iron Man and all that, and that died a long time. That died in '84, and I say it all the time. It died with the hit on Bonventre, and then a couple of people, the Pizza Connection cases. A lot of people, especially my friends that we grew up with as kids, while we were growing up, we didn't have those powerful figures in our life. They were either jailed, dead. I wish we would have at times, because we had people that were just kissing Basciano's ass. When we got in trouble, you were on your own. We had to do a lot of things by ourselves. Like, you want to talk about ballsy kid. The kid Paul I grew up with was a very ballsy kid. Scary, not that much of a ballsy. We grew up together. He'd go against anyone. And he grew up the hard way, not knowing how we were growing up, having people around us, like kids in Howard Beach or Ozo Park. Anytime they would get in trouble, they'd have their parents there and stuff like that. My dad wasn't all about that. Paul's dad was a gem. I'm talking about a giant among. Every time he spoke, he always made sense. Good person, very good person. I had the pleasure of meeting him when he had come out of the Lamb in '89. But so we didn't have that. You understand? So
yeah,
because the Sicilians were gone by that time.
Some other obviously names out there from the area. So, Anthony Aiello, were you familiar with him?
Anthony, yeah. I mean, he's younger than me. Of course, Anthony might as well have been like my nephew. I think he's 5 years younger than me, and he lived 2 doors down. So, of course, Anthony's a good kid. He's another one. His dad went to jail. He didn't have the guidance that once he had. He went from a little somebody being around the. He had more interaction with the Gambino kids at one point than he did actually with the Bonanno people, until those guys from the Bronx came to Ridgewood and did their little recruiting process. But yeah, another tough kid, another good kid, yeah, we all grew up in that kind of same mold.
So I once interviewed obviously Dominic Sicali, and obviously he was kind of under Vinnie Basciano for a while. And he said that, even when Vinny was rising through the ranks, he'd like to get his hands dirty. Obviously, he was a Bronx-based guy, but obviously he was climbing the ranks well in the 90s. Were you familiar with Basciano? Was there talk of him in the street, and was he a bit crazy? Or?
Yeah, no. Yes, we were he was a person that people were familiar with, but did he come around a lot? No, and I think that has a lot to do with Basciano. Thinking one day that Basciano would make a move on him. I just felt that he kept him at a distance out of fear.
So what was some of the names of people you were like I know you know Peter Calabrese and people like that. What kind of were they? Just kind of capable guys, or was there any kind of aura around them at all?
I didn't know Pete in that car. I knew Pete as a guy that like from Staten Island that probably be a soccer that not a soccer that more like a baseball league coach. Funny guy. I think he was arrested for the first time when I met him. He was just a happy-go-lucky guy and got caught in something that I don't that maybe when he was younger sounded like a good idea. A lot it happens to a lot of people. And then when they're older and their family gets going and they have grandkids or whatever, they're like, "What the fuck," you know? But he ain't no rat, you know. Give him. He took his time. He has his family out there, and that's what Pete did. But I'm pretty sure if you ask him how he felt about that life now after all he's been through, he'd probably tell you a bunch of bullshit.
And what about Vinnie Asaro?
Edgy.
Edgy.
Yeah. You didn't know who you were going to get in that day. You just, he made it was like walking on eggshells. We'd meet up with him every Tuesday. We had when he was Vito Grimaldi's captain, we used to meet up at his restaurant in Long Island. And yeah, he was edgy. You didn't know. He made me uncomfortable, definitely.
Okay.
And it wasn't in a scary way. It was like in a not consistent way. I mean, he's a scary guy. Don't get me wrong. If you wanted to put one in me, you put one in me in a second. But that's a lot of people, though. So you just didn't give people reason like that to get on their bad side.
Talk to me about Sal Vitale.
Yeah, Sal Vitale was around like the 90s. He was an upcoming big star in the family and in organized crime and in the families. Being that we were the only me being an associate, we're the only stable family in the five families, you know. And this is a guy who's doing big things. And even though, like I said, we don't talk about what he was doing, but it looked like people that I looked up to him. So, okay. So he had this big aura around him. Not to know later on, we found out that he in his yearbook he wanted to become a policeman.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually, I'll show you a picture of that if you want. And check out our show, and we have a picture of that. Okay. and not only that, but he was a correction officer. You know, he was driving prisoners back and forth, which is the ultimate no. But he had that. He definitely had. I remember going to a Christmas party, and there was a line of guys giving him an envelope and wishing him a Merry Christmas. You know, and having my Uncle Cheech go, you know, say hello to Mr. Sal, you know, and all that stuff. But whatever. It was. He had that aura for sure.
Okay, which is obviously with the position I understand, but he never really comes across as that kind of fearsome kind of individual. But obviously, as you say, he had that aura and therefore kind of the respect.
Oh, he most definitely did. Now, without a doubt, he most definitely did. At the end of the day, all these guys between the ones that are the ones that seem harmless and the one maybe you should worry about them sometimes more because you see the other guys coming. All the guys that were stronger personalities, you know, you kind of you take a step back and want to see where you're at. But I mean, the Sonny Black crew, the old ones, which I ended up hanging out with in the 90s, and I had a lot of good times with it. They felt like going to Thanksgiving dinner every weekend. You had a lot of stuff going on, and it was fun. It was a fun group. I liked them a lot. But yeah, they had a reputation. If they had to kill you, they'd kill you.
Do you know Bobby Sarasani then?
No, it was Nicky Santoro, Anthony Rubito. There was Sally Bross. We used to hang out in this place, the Metropolitan Grill, and I it was fun. They were a good group. I liked them too.
I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for watching.